This is Power Athlete Radio. With your hosts, Denny K, Professor Booty, and the Luke Summers. And now, toes forward, hips locked, shoulders set, and retract those scapulars. It's time for some knowledge bombs.
Thanks for tuning into Power Athlete Radio. We are proud to bring you episode 110 with our special guest, Travis Pollen. Travis is an athlete, a coach, and an author whose background, as he'll explain, is steeped in strength and conditioning. Travis discusses how, despite being born a congenital amputee, he never places barriers on himself or other athletes. This combination of perseverance and competitiveness led him to become a record-holding Paralympic swimmer. Travis collaborated with me to help build a two-part article in which we discuss the nuances of coaching athletes with physical impairments. Because he is a practicing CrossFitter and regular competitor, he is even more familiar with the challenges of taking full-body movements and altering them so that they are accessible to every adaptive athlete. I even breached the controversy of performing these movements to a standard that could become mechanically unsound, particularly for an athlete who is even more prone to things like compensation injuries. Travis intelligently walks us through how bridging the gap between rehabilitation and strength training is a matter of working within the range of motion or movement pattern that makes sense for that athlete. Sometimes that means taking a step back and putting other options on the table, such as machines. With training goals that are no different from an able-bodied athlete, Travis explains how getting stronger develops not only a physical edge, but a mental fortitude. This has ultimately allowed him and so many other athletes to set lofty goals and perform the unimaginable. And now I bring you episode 110.
All right, Power Athlete Nation, what is happening? Welcome to another episode of Power Athlete Radio, the premier podcast in strength and conditioning. This is Denny. Today I'm here with Callie, Luke, and Tex. And our special guest is Mr. Travis Pollen, a.k.a. the Pollinator.
Awesome.
Travis, first of all, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You and I got to speak a little bit a couple days ago. Callie since has put out two great articles on coaching and training with adaptive athletes, but maybe we can just kind of get the show rolling with, just kind of like your story, your journey a little bit, and then, like as Callie said a few minutes ago, all hell will break loose.
Sounds good. So I'll start with what I'm doing now. I'm 25 years old, and I'm a master's student in biomechanics at the University of Delaware. I'm also a personal trainer and guess you could say adaptive CrossFit athlete. But rewind about a decade, I was a high school swimmer, and I started lifting weights to get what I like to say, a leg up on my competition. I say a leg up because I was born missing my left leg, like a rare congenital abnormality that resulted in the absence of my left femur. So anyway, I was a high school swimmer, and I wanted to do everything that I could outside the pool to try to even up with my able-bodied teammates. And so I started lifting weights the summer after my first season, and I remember I was in the basement of my local YMCA, and I had a book called Getting Stronger by Bill Pearl, which I didn't know at the time it was a bodybuilding book, or I did know it was a bodybuilding book, but I didn't know there was a difference between, bodybuilding, powerlifting, sports performance training. I just thought lifting weights was lifting weights. So here I was, like, reading out of the book, doing a leg curl or leg extension or a bicep curl or stupid exercises that probably didn't really help me that much in the pool, but I got kind of jacked, so I figured I was doing it right. But then fast forward a few years, I was swimming in college, and I figured that I really needed some help in the gym setting. So I hired a personal trainer, and I worked with her for a couple years, and we sort of figured out that I had a knack for resistance training, and I really enjoyed it. And she said, you'd be good at this. You'd be a good personal trainer. You should go get your certification. So I was a physics major in undergrad, and once I was done with that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I graduated. So I was like, all right, let me goof off for a little, get my personal trainer certification and see what happens. Well, I did, and I ended up really, really loving being a personal trainer. So I thought it was just going to be like a few months that I would do this, and then I would, go back to school and get a higher degree, which I am doing. But now I'm almost done with the master's, and I foresee myself continuing to work in the strength and conditioning realm for the rest of my life. Writing, coaching, hopefully in the future, lecturing at seminars, etc.
Awesome. So Travis, what do you think it was that really started to draw you towards strength and conditioning? You said you almost immediately enjoyed it, and your trainer said you had a knack for it. What aspects of strength and conditioning really appealed to you?
So what I really love about it is, like I said, I was a physics major in college, and so I've always had a love of numbers and mechanics, and then I've always loved exercise. So being able to combine the two and really taking like a scientific approach to training is what gets me going. So trying like crafting workouts or like training programs for people, it just is a really satisfying feeling. And then like applying scientific principles. Like a few weeks ago, I wrote a blog post about moment arms, and like nobody gives a crap about moment arms in general. But when you give specific examples of how you can use these principles and apply them to your resistance training program to get a muscle building effect, that's what gets me excited. And hopefully when people can understand the science behind something that they've always felt intuitively, it really expands their minds.
So you almost are refuting one of the comments that you made earlier, which struck me, is that you kind of jokingly said that you were doing some bodybuilder stuff, and its transference to your sport maybe wasn't direct, but you know from a science aspect that it is indirectly, it's certainly adding to that GPP. And from a physics standpoint, I mean, as far as gaining musculature and muscle density and things like that, that the bodybuilder training it definitely did have an impact in your training.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, just in terms of getting a bigger cross-sectional area is going to make you stronger, but are bicep curls really the exercise that I should have been doing every day, or should I have been doing pull-ups? So just in terms of like really honing in on optimizing the time that I was spending if I was going to the gym every day, rather than doing lateral raises, like let me do some overhead press.
Right, that makes perfect sense. Well, that's awesome. So moving on to some of the questions here. We talk about the common goals of the adaptive athlete, the mental toughness that we see in all athletes, and the need to kind of excel in strength conditioning is an important aspect to any athlete, right? Because I think it has that ability to parallel our real life struggles, right? And those struggles are, for some adaptive athletes are more challenging than other able-bodied athletes, right? And so where do you see that parallel in the training, and how do you think it impacts that athlete in terms of their ability to kind of have that confidence and that strength of mindset outside of the gym?
Yeah, well, I kind of view the gym as a microcosm of the world. Like if you approach the gym, or because I grew up as a swimmer, the pool as well. If you approach like a workout and you aren't sure if you're going to be able to do it, but then you just, you go for it, and you end up being like exceeding all expectations and doing something that you didn't think you could do, I think that has a lot of transfer to your everyday life. So the success that you come by in your exercise also applies to then, like, especially for someone who has a disability, like going in, I don't know, taking the stairs at the wherever you are. Like you've conquered something in the gym, and then you're out in the real world and you see something that you didn't think that you could do before, but now you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of take like a step back, can we define for anyone who maybe hasn't read the interview with you, and I know Denny said some kind words about the article, but really like the basis of information came from you and your experience in the field. But can you define adaptive athlete? I know that it's a really general term actually, which was kind of new to me, that it wasn't like a specified term, because like you said, we're all to some degree adaptive athletes. But in this context, can you kind of lay out what we're defining that as?
Absolutely. So like you said, and that we're all adaptive. That's something I stole from a couple of women who started a foundation called I Am Adaptive. They're out in Florida. But the idea is that everybody, whether they're overweight or they have some sort of illness or condition where they have to adapt to whatever they're doing in the gym. So in that sense, we're all in some way, shape, or form adapting. But in particular, like the adaptive athletes that you would see competing in the Paralympics or in the adaptive division of a CrossFit competition, people like me who are an amputee, either missing a leg or an arm or both, people who with cerebral palsy, people who have traumatic brain injury, so even sometimes things that you can't see to the naked eye, people with visual impairments, so just anything under the sun. And the really cool part is that at least in the adaptive CrossFit competitions that I've done, everybody competes against everybody else. So there are no divisions, which was new to me because I thought, well, how am I going to compete against somebody with one arm? Like, that's not fair. But the organizers of these events have worked relentlessly to try to figure out what the best scaling factors are for the workouts, just so you can throw everybody into like 3 minutes of max hang cleans, and then just everybody, like, your score is whatever multiplicative factor based on your physical difference. So that was really cool to contrast it with when I was swimming in the Paralympics. I was just competing against people missing an arm or a leg, and then there was a different division for people missing 2 legs, different division for people with cerebral palsy, which was fine, but the divisions weren't that great because if the more you broke it down, the fewer people you had to compete against.
Yeah.
Whereas if everybody goes together, then it's just, I'm next to the guy who has no hands, who's doing cleans with like hooks attached to his residual limbs. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Mike, another question kind of with regards to that I just kind of thought of was, in your training versus in a competitive scenario, whether it be sport or it's sport of fitness, CrossFit, how do you determine whether or not you're going to use a prosthesis during your training or during competition? I mean, is it just it's whatever you choose, or it depends?
That's a great question.
Is it like it depends on the goal of the workout? I'm sure, right?
Absolutely. So just for me, if I have to do anything where I'm squatting or deadlifting or picking weight up off the floor or anything body weight, I'm going to take my prosthesis off because it just gets in the way. Even though it's only about 7 or 8 pounds, it restricts my mobility in getting to the floor or in squatting deeply. So I just get rid of it. And because I was born without my leg, like, I can stand on one leg for an hour at a time, no problem. But if I'm going to do something, the problem with that is that I'm only working really one side of my lower body and my core. And so that's fine in a competition setting, just like any competitive athlete will sort of risk their body for the sake of competition. Not that I'm risking my body, but I'm not building strength symmetrically when I don't have my prosthesis on. So so when I'm training for a competition or when I'm in competition, if I'm going to perform the workout better, then I'm going to take the leg off. But when I'm just training on my own, I do everything that I can to develop strength symmetrically in my lower body. So exercises that I can do unilaterally, so that I can't even use my good side, and I can just train my affected side, focus on that, like single leg glute bridges, or like something stupid like side lying abduction or clamshells. And then even like hang power cleans. So instead of taking the leg off and doing them from the floor, I'll just do them from the hang, and I'll try to use my affected side as much as I can.
Yeah.
So, but then also, like, there were some guys from Latin America at the last CrossFit competition I did. It was called the Working Wounded Games, and my Spanish was rusty, so I was talking to them in Spanish. They were talking to me in English. But basically, from what I understood, was that their prostheses, like, they couldn't afford to break them, basically, because they're super expensive, and they only had one. I mean, I only have one, and they're super expensive too. But if it breaks, then I go get it fixed. But these guys, they just took the prostheses off and did everything on one leg, farmers carries, and like just crazy stuff that most people would not think was possible without a leg.
Yeah.
Even me watching this guy do it, I was like, how are you going to hop for 2 minutes with 70 pounds in each hand? But he did it.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it's just a matter of necessity. But in general, like you said, there are certain times when you want to use the assistive technology, and other times when it just gets in the way and slows you down.
So, Travis, this kind of reminds me of another question, and this is going to be a little bit like controversial, what I'm going to say. And I think that you're a sound guy, you seem rational and reasonable, so I know you won't get upset with me saying this, but does there come a point where, for instance, the CrossFit movement and what we call like the functional movement, right? It becomes unsound, like mechanical movement patterns for an athlete who is an adaptive athlete, for where to simply achieve the movement that needs to be done, they end up compromising good mechanics, or they're, for instance, like
without a doubt is the
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So definitely, for me, a few months ago, I posted a video of a 1 rep max clean and press that I did. And I didn't realize, I guess, when I put it up, I was too excited that I did a body weight clean and press on one leg.
Yeah.
So I put it up, and then I was playing it back in slow motion, like after I'd already posted it to social media, and I realized that I had some really funky stuff going on at my knee. Like, it was going into valgus, then it was going into varus, and people were commenting like, that's great, but like, don't you worry about your knee? And I was like, yeah, I guess, but this was my 1 rep max. Like, anytime somebody's going to do a 1 rep max, it's not going to be their prettiest lift.
Which is true, yeah.
Because if it were, then it wouldn't be their 1 rep max. There's going to be a little bit of technique slip. So I still wasn't happy about it. I wish that it had looked perfect, because I'm trying to disseminate good sound training principles, and there I am having something that could potentially be injurious up on my website. Mm-hmm. But like you said, so that's one issue. But when those movement patterns are becoming recurrent in your training at submaximal loads, that's when you definitely run into problems.
Yeah.
And I know that, even from my own experience, for years I was training for swimming, and I wasn't even worried about strengthening my affected side, my short leg, because it wasn't propelling me in the water. So I was doing single leg squats, single leg cleans, single leg Olympic lifts, until I realized that the potentially part of the cause of my back pain was that I had these really overdeveloped spinal erectors on one side and nothing on the other side.
Yeah, that's funny, because, and Tex can jump in here, it's no different than what we do with a high-skilled athlete who's overdeveloped on one side, whether it's their throwing arm or, striking arm or whatever it is, or kicking leg. I mean, part of what we do as strength conditioning coaches is try to create some sort of symmetry, if not for any necessarily performance aspect, but really just as a preventative maintenance type thing.
Right.
Like thoracic rotation, making sure that there's, so that we can avoid injury.
Right. So the asymmetry that you develop might be beneficial for your sport if it's like a rotational sport where you're always throwing right, always batting right. But then when you go to pick something up off the floor and you tweak your back because you're so asymmetrical, I guess that's where you have a problem. Yeah. But even like I'll watch other CrossFit or other adaptive athletes compete, or even just training, and I'll see like, okay, if you're doing a clean from the floor and you have one arm, there's no way that you can get the bar off the floor without doing something funky at your lumbar spine, kind of rotationally,
right,
to dip under the bar. And so that's on like a rep by rep basis, that might not hurt you, but if you're performing all of your reps like that and you can't counteract it, then you're going to have problems eventually, right. I think.
Right. And it's not a slight on, the sport of fitness or anything like that, but it is very in vogue right now. And, it's great when it's scaled in an intelligent way for that particular athlete, because, it does sort of make me wonder. You have so many younger adaptive athletes, and you just want to see them have strength for a lifetime. You don't want it to be sort of this like burn out quickly because we've developed these overuse injuries in the dominant side or what have you. And that was kind of my only concern when I dove into some of the research on this.
Yeah, and then so you could also equate it to something like what the CrossFit athletes are doing at the games with like weighted GHD sit-up throws.
100%, yeah.
Like you're gonna do something, you're gonna do it in competition, and that means you kind of have to train it as much as you have to in order to perform it well. And it's not necessarily the best movement for you, but because you're able to, because you can set standards to it, like you touch the floor on the bottom of the GHD sit-up, and then you touch your toes at the top, or you pick the bar up off the floor and you finish in the rack position, like that's the easiest movement to judge and score, but it might not necessarily be the best for that athlete. But then if something is really far out there, like we know you're going to get hurt, then we will like adapt it. We will modify it so that you can use a kettlebell instead of a barbell. So from like a really, really like, if it looks like you're going to get hurt, like acutely, then you modify it and scale it. But if it's like just a little shaky, then it probably passes.
Yeah, sure.
From a kind of a long-term athlete development perspective, we start with perfect posture. From perfect posture, then we kind of add kind of the asymmetric elements or single arm, single leg stuff to challenge it and try to take it away, but they're still maintaining it. And kind of that far end approach is we start in bad positions and then it's regain it, because we know at top level sports, football, basketball, really anything, that you're going to get out of a bad position. So, I mean, we would take that same approach. If we meet 101, we'd set up a good posture and then kind of see where we go from there to challenge it and try to take it away.
Yeah, the challenging part when you're working with somebody whose body is asymmetrical, though, is that you can challenge them in one position and they can get out of that bad position, but then you can't work the other side because it's not there. So, sometimes if you have like a residual limb that goes like say your arm goes down just to the elbow, well, you can throw some bands on and like rig up some kettlebells and you are able to use what you have. But sometimes it cuts off right at the shoulder, and as a result of that, you probably are going to be pretty asymmetrical. And whether or not that is painful now or later, I guess is yet to be determined, because a lot of us are just getting into the sport and we're in our 20s and we're doing all sorts of crazy competitions, and we'll see what happens to us in our 30s and 40s. But to counteract, on the opposite end of the spectrum, if we were just sitting around being sedentary, we would definitely be, even worse off in 10 or 20 or 30 years.
Oh yeah,
so,
definitely. There's
of course you have to strike the right balance, and
sure.
some people are probably going too far, but that's kind of our
anything.
Yeah, that's kind of our MO as adaptive athletes, is because we're starting at a disadvantage, we need to work that much harder to get to where we want to.
Sure. Do you, like, Tex, Luke, or Denny, do you guys have any experience working with an adaptive athlete?
Yeah, I do. A few years ago, I worked with a kid. He was 14 or 15, great kid, and his mother told me it was like a tethered spinal cord. So what had happened is he had, like, I think it was his right leg was like atrophied, to where it became a challenge for him, in everyday just movement. So he came to, at that time we were running a CrossFit Kids class, and he had participated in some of the like his school sports, so he was cleared to go. And when in reading the article that you released, Callie, in the second part, Travis, the point that really stuck out to me was you were saying, like, we need to bridge the gap between, like, rehab and then just training. And if that means an adaptive athlete, like, if in this case, the kid that I worked with, like, when he did back squat, it was above parallel, and the approach that I took was, I'm going to watch him perform this movement as safely and as effectively as he can do it. He'll then relay to me, if it hurts, he's not going to do it.
Right.
If it was above parallel, it looked good. Were there some imbalances? Sure. When you spoke earlier about the valgus to various knee, I could tell he favored his other limb, and then the instability of the knee was at first I was like, man, I don't, I kind of was, the last thing I would want to do is injure the kid. But at the same time, if we can work on, like, sound mechanics, to the best of his ability, and we're making progress, then I felt satisfied that I was doing my job, and in time, the squatting back, front squat, now we were doing a CrossFit Kids class, so that he would do, like, dynamic pulling. It did improve. The biggest challenge I had with him was that he had a strong upper body, and he wanted to prove to himself that he could do anything that everybody else did. And at times, were the loads getting a little bit too heavy that I was comfortable with? Yes, but it kind of goes back to, like you were saying, we didn't max out the kids, but as the weight gets heavier, certain things aren't going to look as perfect as we as strength coaches would like. And I just kind of rolled with it, I mean, if I was too uncomfortable with the way it looked, then I would back it off. I do that with able-bodied.
Yeah, that's
we all do that.
Yeah,
and it's nothing against him. It was like, look, I mean, if I'm not comfortable with this, we're not going to do that. But then, I would allow some leeway there, and it was a learning process for me just as much as it is for him. And it goes back to that point you made in the article. It's like, coaches / trainers, like, we need to get to this point to where we're not afraid to, go, take an adaptive athlete from, like, rehabilitation to getting he or she training for, a specific goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't. you see somebody who has a physical difference and you think, oh, we have to be careful, but once they're outside of the acute rehab, you have to train them in order for them to be not just, just to be able to function in their daily lives. They have to get stronger, and you can't just have them lying on the ground doing clamshells and bridging for their workouts. But I liked what you said about, if he was squatting a little bit high, that's okay. Like, we have to, when you have somebody with a difference, you can't just try to mold the individual to the exercise. You have to mold the exercise to the individual. So for years, I was trying to squat low and squat to parallel. And I realized that just because that's the standard for powerlifting, and yes, you want to strengthen your joints through their full range, your muscles through the full range of motion. But for me, the best squat is a high box squat. And because I'm able to work both sides symmetrically. And like you said, you saw him favoring his good side. Sometimes you actually have to reduce the weight so that they're able, and they really have to focus on using their affected side as much as they're using their unaffected side. So for me, I can single leg deadlift 135 pounds, but I can only bilaterally stiff leg deadlift 115, where I'm utilizing both sides of my body. So sometimes you just have to take a step back and, really focus on strengthening that area that needs to be strengthened. And for him, that was his lower body, his upper body was wicked strong. And so just like anybody, you have to work on your weaknesses.
Yeah, I've had a few experiences myself. I think I did some sessions when I was back in DC working as a trainer. I worked with somebody who was missing their right leg from below the knee, and so they had a prosthesis. And generally, when I was asked to train this person, I really didn't think that it was going to be that much of a challenge. And as it turned out, as long as you have sort of a global understanding of strength and conditioning, like you said, where it's you're not, the exercise is just a thing. You can manipulate the exercise as long as you know what stimulus you're trying to drive. There's ways to do it. And one of the things is, as much as I wanted to, and I utilized a lot of either barbell movements, dumbbell movements, movements through different planes of motion, I didn't think there was anything wrong based on this guy's goals to getting him to do things like seated leg curl and things like that. And so I would incorporate those too. And I think that, able-bodied people, adaptive athletes, elderly athletes, youth athletes, we almost forget, based on the times that we live in, that those are still really viable sources. And I think that, especially when you add them, say, at the end of a workout or something like that, where you need to go to exhaustion or something like that, you're taking out stability as a factor of limiting your ability to just kind of move weight through space. And I think that there's a lot of value there that people really sleep on these days,
Yeah, we always poo-poo machine training, but sometimes, for somebody who's missing a leg extension might be the best alternative, because it is going to strengthen their quads, and maybe it's not going to have that same kind of functional carryover as a squat. But if you're spending half your time just doing a balancing act in order to do a squat, then throw them on the leg extension. Right.
Know why you're using the exercise. And then Luke and we worked at CrossFit Balboa, and I think there was an athlete there who was missing her hand at her wrist. Do you remember that, Luke?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and so she had a lot of autonomy in her training, and she would know exactly what she needed to do at any given time. She'd come prepared with whatever apparatus she needed to do, whether it was pull-ups or to create some sort of a band system for whatever it is we were doing. And that's the thing is there's a lot of independence in the athlete, because they know it's going to work pretty effectively for themselves too if they've been training already for a little while,
Yeah, the lines of conversation have to be open, because the athlete knows their body the best, and so oftentimes they're going to be the ones who come up with the trick that gets them to feel the exercise the way they want, or figure out what the way to attach the band to the weight to do what they need to do.
Yeah, and I imagine too, one of the things that I was thinking about going through this process of just kind of educating myself is, I'm sure you see and you are familiar with some athletes who, if it was a congenital defect or some sort of issue from birth, or maybe they lost a limb later in life, but they might go through this personal evolution where strength training is new to them, and then once they find that they are capable of that, do they then think about getting into sport? Like, aside from CrossFit and doing kind of those type of weightlifting competitions, do you see people make that bridge into things like rock climbing or?
Yeah, that happened to me actually.
Okay.
Is that I recently tried rock climbing for the first time, and I was like, holy crap, I'm really good at this.
I bet.
Like,
yeah.
First of all, I only weigh 115 pounds with my leg off, so that's already a huge advantage. And okay, I'm only doing the V0 or the easy routes, but not everybody can on their first day do scale the wall like that. So it turned just from being a swimmer, and then from being a really strong from body weight training in the gym, then I was able to go do this skilled activity and have a lot of success with it.
Yeah, and I think that's
amazing to be able to apply your fitness, into another another realm.
Right, 100%. And I think that's one thing that it behooves an adaptive athlete, even more so because that application continues the drive and the motivation to do the strength training, because I'm sure in some aspects, just in my own training or all of our own training, there can be a point of stagnation where you're like, how is this applicable? Am I really utilizing my time to apply this in something in sport or what I'm doing outside of the gym? And I just think that in order to kind of continue that evolution and that cycle of incorporation into other things, I think incorporation into sport, into obtaining new skill sets in sport, right? So new skill sets like rock climbing, like getting out and playing tennis for the first time, skiing, all these things. It's just got to help the life cycle of these athletes, right?
Yeah, it's nice to have a goal in mind,
right?
Besides just getting stronger for the sake of getting stronger. Last year, I signed up for an Olympic distance aqua bike at the end of the summer, which was the swim and the bike portion of a triathlon. So I was doing the bike on a hand cycle, and the swim was no problem, but I really had to be in good shape to do 25 miles of a hilly course on a hand cycle. And so I was really, I wanted to finish in a reasonable amount of time. So all summer I was focused on, getting strong enough and getting my endurance up enough to do that. Whereas sometimes we just get, bogged down in the day-to-day of going to the gym, and we lose track of what we're doing.
Yeah, I imagine I've worked with one of those hand cycling bikes, and the funny thing is that if somebody came to me and was like, I want to I want to try a different warm up. What is this machine over here? And it'd be the hand cycling bike, and I'd be like, yeah, why don't you hop on there? And we'd do some intervals, and people would die. I mean, it is extremely challenging. It is one of those water resisted hand cycling bikes. And I can only imagine that having used your arms and shoulders and the push-pull movement of lats for swimming, and then having to then hop on the hand bike, that must be crazy taxing.
I'll never do the Olympic distance again. That's for sure. But here's a crazy story. So I was exhausted from this aqua bike. It was on a Sunday. And I went and I said, all right, I'm taking a week off. I need just to rest. And then my training partner the next day was like, hey, let's go to the gym. And I was like, all right, I guess I'll go to the gym. And I PR'd my hang clean.
Wow.
It was the weirdest thing. So I wrote a Facebook status the next day, you never know when you're gonna, get a best lift.
Yeah.
So don't just just based on how you're feeling, not how you think you should be feeling.
Yeah, definitely. We actually oftentimes say that, and we're big fans of kind of working within what we refer to as a daily matrix. So based on, if even if your programming says that you're doing 5 by 5 of whatever, if you're feeling like great that day and you just start lifting and you're like, this is the day, then you go for a PR. Why not?
Oh yeah. And on a day where you're supposed to lift, singles, but you're not feeling it, don't.
Right, exactly.
People, I think, are too rigid, and a bit of auto-regulation can actually be beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. So talk a little bit about some of the competitions out there that exist. And I know that, like you said, you've done a few competitions, and I threw up some of the information on the article regarding the competition that is in Arlington in November.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah, so tell me kind of about those experiences, and if anybody's looking to get involved, I mean, what are some roles that you think people can have at the competition?
Well, first of all, if you're an adaptive athlete, you can compete. And second of all, if you want to volunteer, they're always looking for more volunteers if you're on the East Coast. Because every single person obviously needs a judge, and there's a lot that goes into setting up the venue and taking it apart at the end and all that. But so there's the one coming up in November in Arlington that's called the Working Wounded Games. I think this is the 4th year. Last year they had like 50 athletes, and I'm sure this year there's going to be more from all around the world. Like I said, people were coming in from Latin America. The level of competition is incredible. So I came in 25th place out of 27 athletes, and I'm no slouch. In fact, a few months later, I competed in a bodyweight, able-bodied CrossFit competition, and I won.
My God.
The fact, like, these guys at the adaptive competition, they're like 6'4", one leg, but they're like 250, and they're lifting these Atlas stones, and I'm like, I just want to do some pull-ups. It's just amazing what these people are doing.
Yeah.
So there was that, and then a few months ago in January, I think, they had the Wodapalooza in Florida, where they had an adaptive division. So I'm sure next year or whenever they do it again, that'll happen. And down the road, we're thinking that there will be an adaptive division in the CrossFit Games. Who knows when that'll happen, but so there are competitions all over, and at least for me, I wasn't sure going into it, like, what to expect, or even how to train, because I didn't know what the events were going to be. But even though I finished, low in the standings, it was still a blast, and I met so many people, and I saw how other amputees were adapting exercises and how they were training. And I saw a guy, his name's Zach Rule. You guys should check him out on Facebook. He flipped a 400-pound tire from seated.
Oh my God.
So I flipped that thing once, and it was like the heaviest thing that I'd ever picked up. And this dude like bicep curled it, and then kind of like cleaned it up to his shoulders, and then hoisted it over. It was unreal.
Oh my God, that's unreal. That's great.
Yeah. So
like
just from a spectator standpoint, watching that, it just like it almost brought me to tears. Like seeing what people can do. When things that you never would have thought possible.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted people to take away too from just this podcast and just kind of the articles is not only to just be familiar with the population, but also to not be intimidated. I think that oftentimes people are intimidated when they have, and it's not just adaptive athletes, it could be any athlete that's outside of their comfort zone, right? So even if someone came in and they're a fucking rock star of an athlete, a lot of times that freaks coaches out. And, they're not sure how to approach the training. And, it's all about educating yourself so that you can meet the needs of that athlete. And, would you give any special advice to people if an adaptive athlete walks in their gym in terms of, how to approach, the situation, whether it's modifying something? Obviously, there's a kind of a physical approach that you would take with them. But in terms of just kind of like tact or how to handle, because you never want to set the bar too high or too low, right?
Right.
It's about striking that balance.
I think that, at least for me and for anybody who I've ever met before, we just want to be treated the same as everyone else.
Right.
So, I mean, that, like, I would go as far as to say that has been my goal in life, is just to be viewed no differently from anyone else. And even if that means I have to, like, super compensate in terms of, like, trying to be more independent than a person who has all four limbs, just so everybody sees me as normal. But yeah, so like when an athlete comes in, just, treat them the same as you would treat anybody else. Like if so you're the individual that you worked with the below knee prosthesis.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like he had an ankle injury and he was wearing a walking boot. Like, he'll be able to do most of the same things. So it's actually, it's in a case like that, it's not really that different from things that you probably already have experience from the physical side of things. Your assessment process is going to be basically the same. I mean, depending on the severity of the physical difference, that it might necessitate, being a little more careful or having to get a little more creative. But from the emotional standpoint, I think we just want to be treated the same as everyone else.
Yeah, great. Tex or Luke or Denny, did you guys have any questions for Travis that you wanted to touch on?
I just want to add I grew up with a kid that we just played football growing up, and he was born with just one arm, just below the elbow. So he went on to play quarterback up until about sophomore year. From there, he just ballooned up, and they put him at center, and he was probably one of the best centers that I've been fortunate to know and meet, and it was just kind of awesome. He still bench press. He even stiff armed me one time when I was playing defense, so when he was playing quarterback freshman year. But just a unique experience, and kind of seeing just that as a young athlete, it was fun to grow with that.
And I bet growing up with him, because my friends always like tell me, oh, I forgot that you had one leg. I'm sure you didn't even think twice about it.
No, he even played the guitar. Just an amazing human being named Drew. Went on to play a little ball at TCU, just while he had the time. So he's a great guy.
That's awesome.
I was gonna just kind of ask, and Tex stole my thunder a little bit on my one question, but as far as like, we've talked on the show before about like the in CrossFit competitions, how there's like a connection between the crowd and the athletes performing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, right. And you and I spoke a little bit about this a few days ago, and let's just, so the listeners can kind of get a little like details of the conversation that we had. We kind of talked about like the spectator's view, and the excitement and the inspiration they could get.
Yeah. So think about this.
Like,
if you see,
go ahead.
If you see Callie flip a 400-pound tire, it's like, okay, that's awesome. Like,
I have seen it.
But we expected her to do that. She's a beast. But if you see a guy with who's hopping around on one leg and then pick it up and flip it, like, you probably weren't expecting him to be able to do that. And it's just like, first, so from that side of things, your mind is blown. But then it's also like, wow, this guy obviously has been through a lot. Like, he and most people have been through a lot. So the fact that he has overcome that and now is doing these incredible things, it gives you like more of a common interest. Like, it makes you feel like, hey, he's doing amazing things. Like, maybe I could do something amazing like that. Like, so back to the example of Callie flipping the tire. It's like, okay, she flipped it, but she's like this insane athlete. But this guy, he wasn't blessed with like, that kind of natural talent. Like, if he weren't an athlete, like, he could be in a wheelchair. He wouldn't be hopping around like that. So it's like these people are real. Like, I can relate to the adaptive athletes that I'm watching as a spectator. Whereas, you watch professional athletes, it's like, well, I could never do something like that. They have like good genetics, and I'm a couch potato, and that's just
right. Yeah, and I think we can all relate to that kind of that comparison that we have with each other. It's like, there are different echelons of elite, if you will. But yeah, I think what you said about your first instinct when you see something like that, if I were to see the gentleman you spoke of who basically did like a clean and press from a seated position with the tire.
I'll find that video. I'll send it to you guys.
Oh yeah, I think that like my human instinct is confusion. It's like, am I really seeing what I'm seeing right now? Because this is like unbelievable. And then you think about the physics involved from a science standpoint, like you said, moment arms, levers, all that stuff, and you realize that this isn't just somebody like flipping a 400-pound tire. This is like working against like, the best, most efficient position possible to flip you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the amazing thing. Like, okay, if you're really strong and you're on two legs with two arms, like you can get away with crappy technique and flip it. But the way that he had to first bicep curl it, then get his residual limbs underneath it in order to get the leverage to be able to get it overhead. It was just like such a technical mastery.
Yeah, that's great.
So there's some parallels to swimming in this, in that the harder you work, you tend to drown. I know that from experience.
Oh, without a doubt.
Be just as fluid and efficient as possible.
Easy speed.
So a lot of these adaptive athletes, they're definitely finding that way just outside the pool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tex.
And that's the best CrossFit athletes you see. It looks like they're not working hard.
Yeah.
There's something to that.
Beautiful movers. So one thing that we'd like to do is ask our guests where some of your inspiration comes in the form of the cinema. Okay, because we're big fans of movies here. We like a lot of bad movies. Mostly Luke likes a lot of bad movies.
Well, you're gonna love mine then. I hope you've seen it. Or if you haven't seen it, then I hope you watch it.
All right, let's hear it.
It's called Never Back Down.
Oh my God, I've never heard of it.
It's kickboxing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So it's like, I think it's from 2008 or so. It's like a very cliched, like teeny bopper MMA movie about the guy who gets the girl and fights in the fight.
And let me guess, he never backs down.
How did you know? You said, I thought you hadn't seen it. So the soundtrack to this movie is like Soulja Boy and Kanye. And
Yes.
So as soon as I saw this movie, like I put these songs on my pre-race playlist.
Oh my God.
And there's I think actually I gave you guys the song, the Red Jumpsuit Apparatus.
Yes.
So that would be the song that I would listen to right before my race when I was up like behind the blocks. It got me so fired up, and still it does to this day.
Cool.
Have you seen that music video?
You know what? I don't even think I've seen the video.
It's just a dude just tearing apart an apartment. It's pretty badass.
Wow.
It'll pump you up.
Yeah. So like when I saw this movie in the theaters with my friends, we just got so hyped up. And then I think between my best friend and I, we've probably watched it like 100 times since.
Jesus.
The training montage is just it's incredible. When the master, the MMA teacher, tells the guy not to give up and not to back down, it just like my heart.
Just goosebumps.
Yeah, every time. Even though I know all the words. Even though I know all the words, I'm still surprised when he agrees to the fight at the end. I'm like, no, don't do it. And I'm like, no, like you could have,
Oh my God. So if I see this movie,
Yeah.
Travis, am I gonna regret having watched it?
No, because even though it's cliched, it's still totally cool and
Luke, confirm or deny?
Confirm. You remember Predator?
Yeah. Are you talking to me?
Yeah, Predator moment. When you first watch Predator, I don't know where we're flying, but you're like, I've never seen this movie. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Face slap.
Yeah.
And then we turn it on.
Dude, that was a great movie. Any other movies or sources of inspiration, like either from movies or montages or music that you'd like to? I know we got your playlist, so we'll release that. But any other big pump up or people that you stare at a poster and slap yourself around a little bit?
That's a good question. So growing up, my best friend and I were always really competitive, and we joined the high school swim team together. And he was on. I wouldn't get in the water until he did. As
superstition?
Not superstition. It was just like, well, I can't really get in until he does. Just because I know if he gets in, and he swims a little bit, then I'm gonna be okay. It was just okay, when he goes, I go.
Yeah.
And it was just always kind of like that. I would see him do a set, or he would be doing a set, and I would be like, I'm not sure I can do this, but he's doing it, so let me just do it.
Yeah.
So there was always that, and then another one of my good friends was one of the best tennis players in the high school, and he went on to play in college. And so it was always just us, trading back accomplishments. Oh, you went to this competition. Well, I went to Paralympic Nationals. And
yeah.
So having peers who were competing at a high level always inspired me.
You're a closet one-upper. I didn't know that.
Oh, definitely. So there was so when I was swimming in college, I was okay, but as a person missing one leg, I couldn't really keep up with the guys. But I was very competitive with the girls on the team, and we all practiced together. So there was one girl who she went to nationals every year in butterfly, and her freestyle was okay, but she was more of a distance. She was a good distance freestyler. So her sprint freestyle and my sprint freestyle were perfectly matched, even though that was her worst event, and it was my best event. But we always had the best races in practice.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
And it's always a race, as everyone knows. So even if she didn't know that we were racing, we were racing.
Yeah. Even if we tell people to go 80%, it's 115%. So
of course.
There's nothing better than two humans racing to a finish line. I mean, that's my favorite thing in the world. Any sort of race. Handstand, foot race, swimming race, it doesn't matter. Go.
What about
True form runner race.
In Huntington Beach when they release those, are they ducks into the water, and they're just slow as fuck, and they're just
exciting as hell.
I'm kind of having a Chariots of Fire moment. I can almost picture the running on the beach. Dun 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 dun.
What about when they put two tortoises, two turtles racing each other? Is that exciting?
Yeah.
What, have you ever seen a pig race?
Yes.
Well, you got to go to Katy, Texas, and that is exciting.
Wow. Oh my God. Well, that covers it then. That's more show footage that I'm gonna have to pull up a pig race, tortoise race, and that duck thing.
I mean, nothing gets better than puppies racing either. The Puppy Bowl, when you get a puppy breakaway in the Puppy Bowl at halftime of Super Bowl. Just, nothing more exhilarating.
Oh my God, you guys are idiots. One race that does come to mind though is
the Puppy Bowl.
One race that does come to mind is at every single LFL game, during whatever break they do, basically halftime, they have the guy come out and he has to try to tackle one of the LFL girls, and she's running full speed in his direction, and he has to chase her and try to tackle her. And he never tackles her. I don't know. They're at a disadvantage.
Somebody from the crowd?
Yeah, someone from the crowd.
Somebody. Yeah.
This is amazing.
So that's pretty good. Yeah, Tex, you just change your what are you training for, right?
And they usually seek out the fattest, drunkest old men.
Yeah.
Curvy men. It's fucking awesome.
It is great.
Long-term training goal.
Wait, so I'm looking. I knew that there was this women's football league. And I'm unclear whether it's called the Legends Football League or Lingerie Football League.
It is, Travis. It's formerly known as the Lingerie Football League. It's formerly known. So it's classed up its name a little bit.
Oh, okay.
It's been rebranded.
It's kind of like every guy's dream to have to tackle one of these girls.
Exactly.
Unless you some of these chicks are pretty gnarly, dude. Some actually know how to lower their shoulder and blow some people up.
Yeah. Some of these girls are, they are more just medium-sized men. They're aggressive.
Yeah, they're pretty ripped. I don't know if I would want to take a shoulder into the...
Oh, I'd take one.
But yeah, exactly. But you know you'd still do it.
Remember we were talking with Chelsea, and she's getting all geared up for the championship last year, and she's like, I'm getting ready to take that bitch out at her knees.
Yeah, she's insane.
She's a true competitor.
She is.
A lot of those girls are. I mean, it's awesome. It is a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. Well, Travis, let's segue then to if anyone wants to get in contact with you personally, if anyone wants to get to know the Fitness Pollinator. By the way, I only allow one pun on every show, and we've reached that maximum now. So, but I love your website, and and I'd like to get my hands on your book too, if you know someone who could potentially, maybe send that my way. But tell us just briefly how people can kind of get in touch with you if they want more information.
So my website is www.fitnesspollinator.com, Pollen like my last name. And if you want to contact me, there's a contact page. There's a tab at the top. And I'm pretty good about responding. Actually, I think, Callie, that's how you got in touch with me the first time.
Yep.
And I'm also on Facebook. I post fitness stuff on a daily basis, videos, tips, funny pictures. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time to chat with us about this and educate everyone, and obviously helping me with the article. I know this is going to be very informative because it's a subject matter that doesn't get enough attention, I think, and is more prevalent than people think. So
and for another good place to go that we mentioned in the article is iamadaptive.com.
Great website.
Yeah, we had talked a little bit about that before, but they're they're a new organization, but they're going to be like the hub as far as information, and also like bringing together adaptive athletes from around the world, and even in partnership with the Crossroads Adaptive Athletic Alliance, like educating athletes and coaches with seminars about adaptive training techniques.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. So definitely a good website to check out.
Super smart. Yeah, there needs to be a CrossFit specialty seminar, just like we have CrossFit football. There needs to be like CrossFit adaptive athlete. I think that would be great.
I always receive these Facebook event invites to the Crossroads Adaptive Alliance seminars that they're doing, and they're never nearby me, but that goes to say that they're going on all over the country.
Right.
And so the information is out there, more so now than it's ever been. And for me growing up, that was really frustrating because I would search the internet for I wanted to know if a person with one leg could do a squat snatch.
Right.
And nobody had really done it before. Not if you Googled it, not if you searched YouTube. It was all just people lying on their backs and doing glute bridging. And that's fine for when you're acutely rehabbing an amputation, but if you want to achieve elite levels of performance, then the information just wasn't there. And if maybe you did find somebody goofing off, trying to do a one-leg snatch, it didn't look that pretty. So for me, I wasn't sure if it was even possible. But I asked my mentor, who was teaching us Olympic lifts in personal trainer school, and he said, I firmly believe that anything that you can do on two legs, you can do on one. And so I proved it. A few months ago, I did a squat snatch. Granted, it was with a sissy bar and some bumper plates on either end, but it looks really cool. So, there's nowhere to go but up in terms of the weight, but anything is possible, even things that you didn't think were possible before. So the advice I give everyone is, even if you don't think you're going to like it, just try it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, again, thank you so much, Travis.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot, Travis.
All right, take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. To learn more about training adaptive athletes, check out my article on powerathletehq.com, or better yet, find Travis Pollen on social media. He is fitness_pollinator on Instagram and TRPollen on Twitter. You can also visit his website at www.fitnesspollinator.com. One of the amazing resources that he referenced was IamAdaptive.com. Go to this website right now. Don't hesitate. I promise you will be changed by what you see. This company has such an incredible mission statement, and I can't say enough good things about it. Plus, they have a pretty badass logo, and if you buy a shirt, you can support their cause. Join us next week when we chat with Dr. Allison Bragger. If anyone out there has the balls to complain about their work and training schedule, perhaps you'll reconsider your list of excuses when you imagine a day in her life. She is a practicing neuroscientist, a sleep specialist, educator, and a 2015 CrossFit Games competitor. Until next week, bye!